Hi, welcome to the Motion Picture Notion. I'm your host, Gabriel Burton. And today I want to try something new, alright? I'm going to call this Trilogy Tuesdays, alright? Every Tuesday I'm going to talk about a trilogy that I really loved or really hated. And to kick it off, I'm going to start with the Back to the Future trilogy. The original Back to the Future from 1985 is literally my favorite movie of all time. It used to be The Breakfast Club, but I decided that based on sheer watchability, Back to the Future is my favorite. This is one of the first movies I've ever seen, okay? I've been watching Back to the Future since I was like, I want to say 4. My parents had a VHS of it. I am 30, okay? That is 26 solid years that I have been watching Back to the Future. And in all that time, I have seen it literally hundreds of times. No exaggeration. I love it. It excites me, it makes me laugh, it gets my heart pounding. The music is great, the direction is great. Overall, the movie is just fun. Back to the Future is what a movie is supposed to be. I think there's very few people out there who probably haven't seen Back to the Future, but just saying, there's probably going to be spoilers. The first Back to the Future is so great because you see this kid, Marty McFly, and you feel kind of bad for him because it's like his home life is just a wreck. He's got this girlfriend, he really wants to go away with her for the weekend. When you find out that like the neighborhood bully Biff has crashed his father's car, so he's not going to be able to take it to go up with, camping with his girlfriend. And you meet his entire family, you know. He's got a brother who, no disrespect, is he's like probably getting closer and closer to 30, and he's working at like, a pizza place, and he's got his sister who just seems kind of miserable, and he's got his mom who seems alcoholic, miserable, and as though she's in a very unhappy marriage. And she's like really uptight. She's got a huge stick up her ass. She doesn't like Marty's girlfriend because she thinks that she's too like abrasive. And you're sort of like, wow, this Marty is the only like one that came out kind of normal from this family, So anyways, he gets a call late at night from his friend Doc, who's crazy mad scientist, and shows him that he built a time machine out of a DeLorean. And it turns out that this time machine is powered by plutonium, which, obviously you can't just get anywhere. So they run a test, and this car like speeds down the parking lot. Once it hits 90 miles per hour, boom, it's gone. Doc uses his dog, Einstein, as a test subject. 1 minute later, 1 minute into the future, whoosh, the car just comes like right back. He has Marty like record all of this on a video camera, and all of a sudden, you see headlights coming up over the horizon. These Libyan people who were, I guess, terrorists, and they wanted, they gave Doc the plutonium because they wanted him to assemble a nuclear bomb for them, but, he didn't. He built a time machine. They gun down Doc. Marty, gets in the DeLorean because that's all that's there, and he starts speeding away. The second he hits 90 miles per hour, he's back in time. 30 years in the past when his parents were kids. And he meets his parents. And he sees that his dad, throughout the course of his life, has pretty much been the same person. He's just this nerdy kind of victim who gets picked on by the local bully Biff, who is also really pretty much the same. The real difference is his mother, and I'll get to that. He basically catches his father trying to spy on his mother, and that was the legendary day that his dad fell from the tree, and his mom's father hit him with a car. And that was basically why they fell in love, because she felt bad for him. So Marty sees this about to happen. He sees his dad dangling from the tree. He jumps, he's like, "Dad!" And he pushes him out of the way of the car, and Marty gets hit by the car. And now he meets his mom, who everything that his mom in the future hates about women, she is like a magnification of that. She's very like chasing after Marty. She's smitten with him, she's in love with him, and he's like, "Ooh, you're my mom." And so he contacts Doc in that time, and they got to find a way to make his parents come back together. There's this epic thing where, because they ran out of plutonium, but they got to get Marty back to 1985, he basically says the only thing to generate that much power is a bolt of lightning. And Marty already knows that on this exact night, the night that his parents fell in love at the dance, a bolt of lightning hits the clock tower and basically destroys it in the center of his hometown. So Doc is basically like, oh, holy shit, we'll do that. So they rig up like this wire thing, like, Marty's supposed to take off at this exact time, and there's this hook that's going to channel the electricity into the flux capacitor to get him back, but like everything fucking goes wrong. The last, I want to say, like 20 minutes of Back to the Future are so intense. I'm just like, I'm like grabbing a seat. I'm always on the edge of my seat, and that's part of the directing, the music. Like, Robert Zemeckis knew what he wanted. He had a vision, and he accomplished that vision beautifully. Back to the Future Part 2. I did not see it until years later, so I was kind of like not really expecting so much. But I watched it from the opening, and I'm sort of like getting these little hints like, you know what, I don't think that this is going to be a really good movie. You know, they basically go into the future to prevent Marty's kids from getting into some sort of trouble. We don't know what it is yet, alright? But we find out that Marty McFly Jr., also played by Michael J. Fox, is kind of a wimp. Sort of like George McFly, but in kind of a different way. He doesn't have the goofy laugh. He's just sort of like a little shrimp, and he talks like this. And there's this big fucking dude, Griff, who is Biff's grandson. And that was one of the things, you know, was Griff and the Pitbull Brigade. Because there's a part where Michael J. Fox takes the place of his son, and the event that's supposed to happen to get his son into so much trouble, Marty basically says, like, you know, the answer's no, Griff, you know, and when Griff gives him shit, Marty, like, pushes him and stuff. And then Griff goes, "Since when did you become the physical type?" Yeah, so I'm just like watching this, I'm like, this is kind of silly, this is a little goofy. And then they introduced the hoverboard, which I'm like, oh wow, that's really cool. Hey, you know, these things that these kids are driving around today, they're not hoverboards, okay? Real hoverboards were invented in 1989, alright? And Mattel just didn't release them because they were considered too dangerous. That would be really awesome if that was true. Marty, you know, it's basically almost like an exact reenactment of what happens in the 1950s, except now Marty's out of his league because he's like, he doesn't know how hoverboards work, and he gets like stuck in this like pool. And so they get this big ass, like, it's like a rocket powered hoverboard. It's called the Pitbull, and Griff links all of his buddies onto it, and they're going, he's got a baseball bat and he's going to hit Marty, and all this shit happens. They change the course of the future, but in the process of doing all this, old Biff hops in the time machine, okay, and he steals an almanac, like, from 1950 to the year 2000, all of the sports statistics for every team. So he brings it back to his younger self. Marty and Doc don't know this because when they come back, the time machine is still there waiting for them. So then they get back to their own time. Everything is completely different. Like, Biff has a casino. There's all this crime and like biker gangs and stuff. And I'm watching this. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. This is uncomfortable. This is dark. I don't like this. The movie really picks up, for me, in its second half, where he meets up with Doc in this alternate future. And Doc basically explains to him exactly what happened. He's like, look, we came here in this time, you know, but like something happened. Somebody went back to this time and they created an alternate timeline, and that's what we're in right now. We're in an alternate 1985. So now what they have to do is they have to go back to 1955 where everything started, and they have to get the almanac back from young Biff. And they have to do this without being seen by their past selves. And I also have to say that they did a beautiful job recreating like all the sets and all the scenes from the original Back to the Future, and the fact that like all this shit is now going on and Marty now has to duck himself, you know, and he comes in very, very close proximity to himself at a few points, in which case like everything that has already happened to get them to this point would just be like, you know, erased from existence. Back to the Future 2 is possibly the most flawed of the trilogy, but it is also the most epic, and it deals with so much shit, and it does so actually quite well. Even going back and watching it, I do have like a fondness for even some of the more silly parts and stuff like that, because I know what's happening, and I know what's going to happen, and I'm really kind of pumped for it. Plus, it leads directly into Back to the Future Part 3. Marty McFly goes back to the Old West. This time he has to meet back up with Dr. Brown from the 1950s, again, who just sent him back to the future, alright? And now, Doc is going to send him to the year 1885, which is where he currently resides. And they find out that he's been killed back then on a particular date by Mad Dog Tannen, who's basically supposed to be Biff's like great-great-great-grandfather or something like that, and he's a fucking cowboy. Mad Dog Tannen I liked arguably possibly more than Biff. I'm not really feeling up to this, so I'm going to have to forfeit. Forfeit? What's forfeit? That means you win without a fight. But he can't do that. You can't do that! So then there's this whole thing where they gotta find out like what's going to lead up to Doc getting killed, and they have to, you know, try and stop that. Marty sort of once again takes somebody else's fate in time, and it's like now he's the one who's going to have to fight Mad Dog Tannen, and, you know, it's all a matter of, is the train going to get here on time so he can ditch out on the whole, you know, thing, and they can finally just make it home for good and all. The fuel line to the DeLorean was severed upon Marty's arrival in the Wild West. So they had this really cool idea, and this was like total throwback to the original Back to the Future, and it was a great end, I think, to the series, where they hijack a train. Doc has these highly concentrated like fire logs that he throws into the, you know, into the boiler of the train, and the fucking train just starts like exploding bit by bit, but they're trying to get it up to 90 miles per hour, pushing the DeLorean. They basically took like train wheels and they put them on the DeLorean so that it could ride on the track, and then they used the actual wheels of the DeLorean as bumpers for the front of the train to like push it, and I'm like, that's just brilliant. They incorporate the hoverboard into it. It's not as intense as the original Back to the Future ending, but it's up there. If you haven't seen them, you should absolutely watch them. You know, the beginning of Back to the Future 2 is a little bit silly, but as a trilogy, it's really perfect. That's all she wrote.